The Pittsburgh Steelers have made some noise in free agency, and there's more noise to come. And while we weren't really expecting them to shoot for the stars in this open market, it seems like they're at least trying to with some names. And there's one name in the last 24 hours or so that have popped up that I say is a name to watch. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. And today, we're talking about a name that has popped up on the Pittsburgh Steelers radar that they could be interested in. Now, full disclosure, the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing homework on this player. Does not mean that they have interest to go sign him. It does not mean that he is at the top of their list. It just means that they are looking into him according to sources. But a couple of days into free agency, at this point, anybody that you're doing homework on is an option. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have already a little bit surprised us from time to time. And maybe they're going to bring in one more guy that people probably don't have on their radar. While re-signing DeMonte KZ and Larry Ogunjobi was foreseen, the Pittsburgh Steelers have made some noise. They've let Robert Spillane go, and they reportedly were in on Leighton Vander Esch. Then they were reportedly in on Orlando Brown, which means that they're looking to spend money in places that they think is important. They've gone out, they've gotten Cole Holcomb, inside linebacker, former Washington Commander. He's got to undergo a physical today, but if he passes, he's signing. They've also went out and they grabbed Nate Herbig, or AKA Nate Hebig, from the Philadelphia Eagles, played for the New York Jets last season, started 11 games for them. Patrick Peterson to replace Cam Sutton, and they're turning everybody's heads with their pro day stops, meeting with Trenton Simpson, taking him out to dinner reportedly, heading to Georgia, their first two stops are along the scouting trail, something that they do every year. But there's another name that has come up that I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers have their eye on, and that sources say they're doing their homework on. And again, doing your homework does not mean that you are going to sign them. But this late in free agency, any name that you are looking into is a possibility. And the later we get into free agency, the more and more a likely chance of signing someone becomes, because a player's value is decreasing, especially an older guy, especially in certain positions. And that's what this position is. That is exactly how you could classify this candidate, is somebody who's nearing the age of 30, who is in a position that is not being paid across the NFL in free agency right now, who the Pittsburgh Steelers could bring in, replace Chase Claypool with. They let Steven Sims walk in free agency. He's now on the open market, and maybe they will re-sign him, but he is, for right now, on the open market. So they're looking for a slot guy, a slot wide receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster got $11 million a year. Jacoby Myers, who was expected to be the top dog on the market, $11 million a year. There is no way the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to pay anywhere near that for a wide receiver, so they're looking down the list. And according to sources, they have their eyes on a guy at least doing homework, looking for references, on a guy named Matt Collins out of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Hollins is a guy, he's 29 years old. He'll be 30 years old by the start of the season. He's coming off a 690-yard, 4-touchdown season, his best in the NFL. Before that, he spent the last 2.5 seasons with the Miami Dolphins. His first 2 seasons in the league were with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's never really caught on. He's always been a 10 to 15, most was 16 reception guy until last season. When he joined the Raiders, he had 57 receptions for 690 yards. He averaged 12.1 yards per reception and a career-high 4 touchdowns. He also carried the ball 4 times for 40 yards, and he had 34 first downs through the air. 34 of them. Now, the 33rd team has listed all of the free agents, and the 33rd team is something you could rely on. I think they have good rankings for a lot of these guys. Hollins currently sits between Laquan Treadmill and Marcus Johnson as the 33rd-ish wide receiver in free agency. Guys around him, Marcus Kemp, who is 2 below Mac Hollins, signed a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Washington Commanders. Noah Brown, who's a couple below him, a 1-year, $2.6 million deal with the Texans. So you have to imagine that the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking very, very cheap for Matt Collins, a guy who seemingly has found his footing very late in his career. And that's okay. As long as you find your footing sometime, you could say, hey, I had some success in the NFL. He's 6'4". He's a big guy. He's a former 4th-round pick who ran a 4.53 in the 40. Not great. He had a 1.59 10-yard split. Decent. But there are reasons that it makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. For one, the size, obviously. You let Miles Boykins hit free agency. You let Steven Sims hit free agency. Chase Claypool is in Chicago. Juju Smith-Schuster signs a deal in New England. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they need a big wide receiver. They got George Pickens, but George Pickens is an outside guy. You're not going to use him on the inside. The Steelers want that big body right in the middle that they could use as a vertical threat if they'd like to, but also can just say, hey, man, go catch some first downs. Everything you catch should be a first down. Big body guy, go catch some touchdowns. Add some size. The Pittsburgh Steelers did not have reliable size last year outside of George Pickens, but George Pickens is a different animal. George Pickens is a guy that you're just going to toss up and he's going to come down with it. George Pickens is a guy that you want to use on pretty much every vertical plane you possibly can. George Pickens is just a different type of superstar. He does not classify in the Steelers need a. No, the Steelers have a George Pickens. That's what they have in George Pickens. They need a big body. Mac Hollins, 6'4", 225 pounds. That's a big body. That's exactly what they're looking for. On top of that, great special teams player. The Steelers love their depth wide receivers who play special teams. Miles Boykin, I thought he was a guaranteed return, and I think he's still on the market for the Steelers because of how good of a special teamer he was. But if they're doing their homework on Hollins, Hollins checks that box, and he's a great special teamer. Now, the thing about Hollins is he's got to make the adjustment. The Steelers are going to want to utilize him in the slot, at least to some degree. But in Vegas, unless he motioned into the slot, he was almost always on the outside. But the thing about him that makes sense for the Steelers, that I think has the Steelers' eye, is that he utilizes the middle of the field very, very well. And while he is a deep threat guy, while he is a guy who could outrun most people, who could get around corners, who obviously has the height compared to most defensive backs, he utilizes the middle of the field. He makes catches in traffic, and he really, really strong bodies his way around defenders between the hashes. That's something the Pittsburgh Steelers need in 2023 because they lacked it in 2022. He's got to adjust. That's the biggest, I think, qualm I have with anybody saying that Hollins could be a realistic option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But they're looking at him. They're at least doing a little bit of searching. And there's no way that they're going to let Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Gunnar Olszewski, and Calvin Austin walk into the season and say, these are our wide receivers. Go do something. That's not how this works. They're looking for depth. They're looking for big bodies. They have the little guys. They have the superstars. They have the developing talent in Calvin Austin. They need a big man who could block, who could play special teams, who could go up and grab balls, who could play a little bit of slot. And again, I think that's the biggest question mark with Hollins, but I think that's where they would try to utilize him as a deep threat on the outside and a strong slot guy in the middle. But they're at least looking at him. They're at least talking about him. At least that's what I hear. And he makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if they could get him on a very cheap deal and they feel comfortable with it, I mean, they've shown their hand in free agency, and their hand has said, we are looking to fill the voids. We believe in this team. We believe in what 2023 can bring us. That's why they're going after guys like Orlando Brown and Leighton Vander Esch. That's why they're re-signing their big guys, and then they're making splash plays like going to get Patrick Peterson. And I don't care what you say. I think Nate Herbig is a big signing for them. And I think that Cole Holcomb, he's got some upside. And I wouldn't be surprised if next on their list is Mac Hollins.